So here we go. Mentoring to me is a nurturing art, the art of sharing wisdom and lived experience, of encouraging personal growth, of modeling positive attitudes for life, of offering counsel and advice if appropriate, and even giving a direct challenge or offering a gentle correction when that's appropriate. Mentoring is, I think, best if it's offered with humility and gentleness. It certainly requires empathy and must feel mutually okay to the recipient if this is going to work. It's at its best, I believe, when it sensitively acknowledges the vulnerability of the person being mentored. In our case, of course, as Christians, we must always be informed by the heart and the content of scriptural truths and standards. That's our benchmark in every lesson we mark and every letter we write. Mentoring can take many different forms. It can be a coaching relationship and certainly include a component of direct instruction as opportunities present. It doesn't need to be a long-term relationship. In fact, it can even occur as part of a one-off encounter, as in the case of our Tier 1 students in Crossroads. It can be in the form of correspondence, of course, or it can be face-to-face. So, for example, our prison visits, our chapel services, or even video link when that's available, especially when COVID was on. What you may write in just one pastoral letter could quite wonderfully be life-changing to an inmate, as we've heard several times this afternoon. That's why we're encouraged to pray as we prepare to write to our students. Many of our Crossroads lessons provide wonderful possibilities for pastoral input. But it's fair to say that mentoring relationships are probably most productive when they are long-term. In my almost 10 years as a volunteer in prison ministry, there have been many mentoring relationships that come to mind. And here's just a few examples. First of all, there's Al. Al and I have had a long-term relationship now over 8 or 9 years in and out of prison, covering his last 5 of 13 sentences. We communicate by correspondence and in person. We have comments, of course, in the CPM lessons and in pastoral letters, through visits to chapel services, through catch-ups on the outside when he's been released, and via re-entry support following at least 2 of his releases. It's been a long but positive journey with Al. Secondly, there's Doug. This one started via a request made through the chaplain for a one-to-one visit with this man. It then became more regular through chapel contact. Doug is a doctor by training, 5 degrees after his name. By choice, he has kept himself very isolated in prison, but therefore he is also very lonely. Because of his offence, almost no one outside wants anything to do with him. He's out now, but we still maintain occasional contact. Then there's AJ. AJ was also a long-term detainee, 14 and a half years in prison. By the grace of God, he had a profound conversion experience in prison. When we met in chapel, he was about to start an advanced diploma in theology by correspondence and with the keen support of the chaplain, who I might say has become and remain a very close and intimate friend with AJ. AJ had dropped out of school at 14 years and 10 months, or should I say he was actually expelled from school. And so to tackle tertiary study, he needed coaching, how to write an essay. He'd never written more than a sentence before. How to research theological literature. How to approach assignments. How to reference his sources. They were all new experiences. So as an ESL teacher, my wife Jan was just the right person to assist in his very rapid learning journey. He's out of prison now and has moved on to a degree course in ministry and is looking to become a Baptist minister in about 12 months' time, serving people just like himself. He just needs affirmation and encouragement and a bit of financial support for his fees at theological college. Then there's Cam. Cam is a young man who had caused a death when he had a head-on collision while driving under the influence. We shared a Bible study with Cam each week and encouraged his growth in the early years of his Christian faith. We fellowshipped together with about 6 or 7 young fellows, all of whom had discovered Jesus through the witness of my previous example, AJ. He's now also out of prison, studying for a double degree and firmly established in a suburban church where he's even a part of the worship team. Then there's Sam. Sam finished his sentence for a drug-related offence last week. He has a clear faith, went into prison as a Christian, and started a uni degree in theology while also tackling Tier 3 studies with Crossroads. His personal disclosures about marriage and divorce, about profound disappointments with his previous church, his struggles with theological concepts and biblical interpretation, all this and more has given us plenty to share and to work through as we've corresponded together for every few weeks for the last 12 to 15 months, I think it's been. Sam is also planning to become a candidate for Christian ministry of some kind. But I want to return and focus a little bit more on Al, my first example. Al was almost illiterate when I first encountered him. He's now spent over 24 years of his 55 years in jail. He had no Christian background whatsoever. He was raised in part by one of his sisters, but also lived rough for parts of his early adult life. He's been in and out of prison since his early 20s, and he says he feels safer inside than out. He's a rough diamond, weak-willed, impulsive, hopelessly addicted to alcohol, has few boundaries and few, if any, positive reference points in his life. He once summarised his life to me as no family, no school, no work, no hope. But Al is teachable, he's openly vulnerable, and above all, he's loyal and grateful for the support that he's received through Crossroads. He's completed all of the lessons from tiers 1 and 2. He's very open to accepting strong words of discipline and advice. In fact, I've sometimes really got cross with him and let him know in no uncertain terms that he's silly and stupid in his choices, with a smile, of course. But when required, he clearly shows a simple understanding of the basic biblical truths that he's encountered through Crossroads. He openly confesses a personal faith in Jesus, but he still messes up quite frequently. He actively seeks fellowship when he's inside, but also when he gets out, wherever that may be. Currently, he's in southern New South Wales. His writing, believe it or not, is now legible and mostly comprehensible, and he openly expresses gratitude for the care and counsel that I offer him on everything from Bible truths to sexual temptation to budgeting, how to hold down a job, resisting bad influences, and the list goes on. He's visibly less out of control these days when I see him on FaceTime. He's actively involved in a church in the country town where he is living, and he works as a fruit picker, believe it or not, with the pastor when it's available. I picture Al in heaven enjoying the promises of Jesus as much as the Bible college principal, the Archbishop, and the godly old lady who's faithfully led a Bible study group for 50 of her 85 years before her translation into God's presence. We thank God for the myriad conversations that we've had with inmates as we visit Prison Chapel each week and engage in various other Christian prison ministries. My wife calls it the ministry of turning up to see what God has been preparing for us this week. And that brings me to my final stop press. Just last week, we encountered a chap in chapel who is a trans person. Name is Sasha. He's quite lost, very aware that his mum back in Singapore is worried about him and praying for him. He was raised in the church in Singapore, but drifted away in his mid-teens. I innocently asked him, just to make conversation, what sort of work were you doing on the outside? There was a long pause and obvious awkwardness, and he then said, it was very bad. I joined the dots and realised after he disclosed a little bit more that he'd come to Australia to study psychology at university, but he got distracted by the whole issue of his gender and sexuality and wandered into sex work, into drugs, and into bad influence. It's already his second time in jail, and there's a strong chance that he'll be deported on character grounds once released. He's as camp as all get up, and he admits that he's trapped in a lifestyle that he knows is wrong. He openly says, I want to escape. He feels the shame very keenly and spoke frequently of his mum back in Singapore. He now wants to find a home in a church that will accept him for who he is and who will nurture him back to his roots. All of that was in a conversation that lasted about 20 minutes. He very warmly accepted my offer of a Crossroads enrolment form, and he looked forward to talking with me again at the next chapel visit. I'm currently looking for a possible safe church or churches with which he could make contact when he is released in 5 months from now. That's assuming that he doesn't get moved into immigration detention. The uncertainty of prison life is very significant for many, many, many prisoners. And so the mentoring processes continue under God's grace. Thanks for listening.